Tennessee This Week from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
Hello, I'm Don Hudson, and welcome to Tennessee This Week. There's been a lot of things going on here the last 5 or 6 days. We're going to talk to our political pundits about all these things. But first, just kind of a recap of what's been happening. Not long after the Memphis representative Justin Pearson was sworn back into the legislature on Thursday, the back and forth between Republicans and Democrats started once again. State Capitol reporter Chris O'Brien was there for all of it and breaks down a wild day in Nashville.
No justice, no peace.
Today, Representative Justin Pearson returned to the Tennessee legislature.
Representative Pearson, how do you know? Because it was just 1 week ago that we sat in the State House on the well of democracy and were persecuted. We're called out of our names. We're talked down to and talked about. We're told we didn't understand democracy. We didn't understand our responsibility. Told we didn't belong here. But today, just a week later, there's resurrection that's been promised to a persecuted people.
The House expelled Pearson and Representative Justin Jones last Thursday. I asked the two renewed legislators if they had a message for Speaker Cameron Sexton.
Resign.
Representative Pearson, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, he needs to resign, and he needs to stop all this anti-democratic behavior that led to the expulsion of myself and Representative Jones. The systems of injustice in this state are being led by Cameron Sexton and by the Republican supermajority of this state, and we are all worse off because of it. White folks, black folks, rich folks, poor folks.
I also asked Sexton if he had a response.
Yeah, no. So let me respond to that. I want y'all to be aware that while we were honoring the heroes who stopped further casualties at Covenant School, they chose to hang outside and honor themselves.
Now is a time, given the circumstances from the shooting to today, now is a time where we need to be listening. We need to be, that is a part of how you move forward productively in an environment that we find ourselves in. You listen, you take in, you understand that there are differences. You set aside the high emotion. You work together to say, how can we take those emotions and move them in a productive way forward, including what happened in the last week.
Hopefully we will continue this movement that has awakened a whole lot of folks and a whole lot of young people who are passionate about standing up and speaking up, and they're not going to back down.
Regardless, the House is now back at full strength, and the legislature is rapidly approaching the end of session.
We'll stay until we complete the work that the people sent us here to do and to complete that service.
Which begs the question, will any gun reform pass, given it's the very issue that sparked the events leading to the expulsion proceedings?
I mean, it has a chance. I mean, you got to have the conversations. They've been ongoing now for a couple weeks, trying to get to a right spot and look for solutions, and so that's kind of where we're at.
We're fighting for that right now. I mean, we're fighting. They're wanting to rush and end session. I think they've obviously created an atmosphere up there that's unhealthy for democracy, and so I think they want to get home as soon as possible. However, our job is not done.
The Senate is scheduled for session every day next week and possibly one next Saturday with the intention of closing the calendar for the year.
We need to have substantive and constructive conversations about what our neighbors and constituents are asking of us when it comes to school security to protect children. And we need to get back to that work. And Justin are important voices. They represent a lot of people. And so whether you agree or disagree on the way forward, their voice is really important.
Get on board with equality. Get on board with freedom.
Again, that was Chris O'Brien reporting. Now, meanwhile, a group of Senate Democrats in Washington has asked the Justice Department to actually look into last week's expulsion votes. Our sister station in Nashville got this response from Tennessee Republicans leadership.
If they want to come down here and take a look, we welcome.
I have one response to that. In the U.S. Senate, I'm curious what would happen if someone stepped into the well of the U.S. Senate with a bullhorn and began yelling at one another, especially if it was senators. I have a feeling I know what would happen. They would immediately be arrested and hauled out of the U.S. Senate. So before they start casting stones at us for actually following the rules in this chamber and ensuring every voice is heard, they might want to analyze what would occur if that happened in the U.S. Senate.
Now, Senate Democrats said they want the investigation to see if Pearson and Jones removals violated the Constitution in any way or maybe violated federal civil rights laws. They delivered a letter to the Attorney General just a few days ago. And with that, let's bring in our panel of pundits: Courtney Piper, a political contributor; Craig Griffith, our healthcare analyst; Michael Covington, industrial consultant, all joining us today. First off, let me thank you for taking the time to respond to all these things. I don't really know where to begin because there's so much here, a full plate of things that we could talk about. Let's just start with really the basics here. The expulsion vote, was it a mistake? Was it necessary? Are Republicans going to pay for it? And I'll start with you, Courtney, and ladies first.
Yeah, I think we can look at this from the political strategy standpoint. At least that's how I'm going to examine it. And I think it's important to remember what was happening that day when these events occurred. We had an incredible tragedy that unfolded in Nashville where 3 children and 3 adults lost their lives. And we're at a point in this country where gun violence is now the #1 killer of children. And we had 3 representatives who had it up to here with their colleagues not wanting to address the meat of the issue. So they went into the well, they had the blowhorn, and yes, they disrupted order. Now, I would have loved to have been in the room when the Republicans had their strategy meeting about expulsion versus censure, and why nobody played out this exact scenario if they went to expulsion. And that was making these 3 Democrats heroes and giving Democrats something to run on to pick off Republican representatives in vulnerable districts. And that's where we are. The Republicans have created a mess of their own doing that now gives Democrats something to run against Republicans on in some vulnerable House districts in Knox County.
And Craig or Michael, either one, your take on where we are and what just transpired, good, bad, ugly.
Well, as I said last week, this was a way overstep by the Republican supermajority. If you go back through history, there's been people in the House, Glenn Cassida comes to mind, that have done much more significant actions to the reputation of the House than these 3 individuals did. And he was never expelled from the House, partly because they said, well, they don't want to leave those citizens not represented. But they took no trouble in expelling 3 people and left those citizens unrepresented. So, yes, I don't know if there was anyone in a room that was saying, hey, let's role play this. Let's see the way this gets out. Let's see the way the reaction is going to be. They should have known that these individuals, if expelled, would be handily reelected and handily appointed by their local legislative bodies back to those positions. So it was a policy, it was an overstep, and it just brings to mind the John McCain when he was in the Senate, U.S. Senate, said there's nothing like the tyranny of the majority. And I think what you're seeing now, which may have a more impact, I think, than the actual expulsion, is that people are going to want more of a divided government. I think that they're seeing that if there's one power in any political entity, then no the people with an alternative voice ever get heard. And I think that the people are going to want now divided government as a balance. And of course, the problem with that is you run into a gridlock, nothing gets passed. But I think that you don't have one group of people doing everything they want in any given government.
And Michael, last word.
I got to tell you, the Tennessee 3 to me come across as the Tennessee hucksters. Anything Gloria Johnson's involved with has a degree of smarminess about it. And these 2 individuals, the 2 Justins, the twins, they're bogus. They're 2 bogus individuals. Justin Jones assaulted the Speaker of the House not long before he got into the House with a cup of hot coffee. That's in the police report. He was banned from the Capitol. He is not a person of good character. And the biggest fraud of all is Justin Pearson, who in 2016 was running for student government president at Little Bodine College in Maine, clean shaven, clean cut, suit wearing, moderate speaking. 3 days ago or a week ago, he's doing the worst mockery of Martin Luther King Jr. by imitating his speech pattern. He's got the Jesse Jackson afro and mustache, Malcolm X's glasses, and he's spouting off, oh, it's a long Saturday in Tennessee, but oh, Sunday's gonna come. Anytime you see a black man imitating Martin Luther King to try to make a point, he is a fraud when he opens his mouth. The Tennessee Three are the Tennessee hucksters. And thank goodness, the voters of Tennessee have made Democrats a super minority. And the reason they needed to do all of this to get attention was because they don't get attention. They are not needed in Nashville to do the people's business. And so they decided they would slam their hands on the podium to get attention and use a bullhorn to be heard. But as soon as all this dust and smoke clears, it'll be business as usual, and they'll be back in the back of the room, not being recognized to be heard, and they'll be right back where they were.
Well, of course,
Michael makes a good. I mean, I think Michael's making a valid point in that just because you do not like a representative doesn't mean they should be expelled. It's no secret that these three were a constant thorn in the supermajority side, always trying to hold them accountable. And they saw the Republican majority, supermajority, saw an opportunity to get rid of them, and they wanted to take it. You cannot expel somebody simply because you do not like them.
And they had enough people to elect them to office. So, they must have, some people must have seen value in their appearance.
One last point. They should not have been expelled. Courtney was right. There should have been someone in the room to say, come on, guys, you're being overzealous. You're killing a gnat with a sledgehammer. This is not going to hold up. These thorns in your side are going to be right back. Censure would have been a much better, more judicious use of their time and the power that they have in the super majority.
And I'm sure we'll be asking for a long time why they went that far with it. But this all started, of course, about guns and maybe gun reform and debate about it. We didn't really get much into that, but we now have some more to talk about. So when we come back with Courtney and Craig and Michael, we'll discuss possibilities of gun reform and where we're going there in the state of Tennessee.
I'm asking the legislature to bring forth thoughtful, practical measures to do that, to strengthen our laws, to separate those dangerous people from firearms, while at the same time preserving the constitutional rights require coming together, laying down our previously held positions potentially, and it really is just going to require finding the things that we agree upon together. I believe that this will protect victims, that it'll hold dangerous people accountable and away from firearms, and that it'll preserve constitutional rights at the same time. We won't know what those details are until we have everyone work together.
We've seen lots of statements of broad support, but what we need to see now is people actually put their back into trying to pass something.
I mean, there's always a chance. I think the House and the Senate and the administration are working together. We'll see how that comes out in the next several days.
We're not going to get all the way there this year in the next couple of weeks, but I feel like we can make some good steps forward, and we already have with the school safety bill.
Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Well, lawmakers passed a gun bill coming out of the tragedy, of course, at the Covenant School. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has called for measures to keep people who are a danger to themselves or to others from actually having access to guns. He wants the measure to also uphold due process and the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Our national sister station sent a note to every Republican state lawmaker asking who is drafting that order of protection law. They didn't get a clear answer from anyone. And when we asked if they would support that type of bill, lawmakers are saying that they won't respond to a bill until they actually see the bill.
Right now, there's just conversations because there's no legislation. There's nothing for me to directly comment on because there's no language. There's no legislation.
And Speaker Sexton said, we are aware of several members who are drafting legislation on this issue, but haven't seen the language yet. the legislative session's expected to end really in a matter of weeks. So again, to the panel of pundits, and I guess we can go in reverse order and start with you, Michael. Are we going to actually get some type of gun reform law? And will it be something that makes everyone happy? Because again, as the governor mentioned, these red flag laws, there are people that say, hey, these are controversial. Yeah, they can stop someone, but at the same time, they can also infringe on people's rights.
Well, whatever it is, whatever legislation is crafted between now and the end of the session, it's going to infringe on some rights. It's going to infringe on some gun rights. And maybe it should. I don't really know. I don't really know that anything that they're going to pass is going to change what happened at Covenant School. That individual wanted to kill adults and children. I don't know that any legislation that the Tennessee legislature is going to enter into is going to stop that. The individuals that knew that she was in a dangerous place in her life, those are the folks that really let down everyone. So I don't really know that the Tennessee legislature is going to come up with something in the next several weeks that's going to stop what happened. What we've got to do is to figure out how we address the people that are doing the killing. Legislation is just not going to stop that.
Craig,
well, actually, I think that in this particular case at the Covenant School, a red flag law might have been significant if it had been reported to law enforcement that this individual had mental health problems. So red flag laws have been successful in other states. But the real issue to me is Governor Lee going to work his suggestion? Is he going to get out there and lobby the legislators to pass some sort of red flag law or order of restriction, whatever the NRA likes to call it? So is he actually going to do something, or is he just going to on one day say, this is what I'd like to see the legislature do, and have nothing to show for it at the end of the session? Now, he can say, well, we'll take it up next year, and that is a possibility. But, it's the tide is tipping in favor of doing something in the state on gun violence, some common sense solutions. Now, the executive order that the governor signed to make sure that there's better communications between the law enforcement and courts, so that someone who has had convictions is better represented in the database in case they do go out and try to buy a weapon illegally. So, but we need to see if a red flag law is possible. Some gun lobbies have come out and said there's no chance. And unless the governor works it hard, unless he works it as hard as he worked his transportation legislation in this session, nothing will come of it.
And Courtney?
First, I think it's really important to recognize the governor. This executive order is an extraordinarily bold move for him, and it's extraordinarily progressive. And I would suspect he did it because his wife lost whom he referred to as a very close friend in the Covenant School shooting. So it hit really close to home for him. And I would suspect that's what inspired this bold action, and he should be recognized for that. Now, this entire discourse with the governor going back and forth with members of the Tennessee General Assembly about, you're going to do it. No, you're going to do it. Well, I haven't seen the bill yet. It puts all of the Republicans' worst qualities on display for voters to see, and it's not going to help or further their position anyway. And it really shows voters what the Republicans are going to prioritize for Tennesseans. Tennesseans, the vast majority, by and large, want better gun safety laws, and we can start with these kinds of background checks. And if our state legislature can't get it together, there will be political consequences for them.
All right, and on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with our pundits and much more.
It won't solve all the problems, but I think it will go, it'll take a good step forward.
We need to be very, very careful. I do not support anything that does not include full due process. It's a constitutional right, whether you agree or disagree with it. The right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental constitutional right, and I support that right wholeheartedly.
It is a pleasant surprise. I know the governor and Republican leadership has said that they want to do something, but to see him come out so strongly, especially for a red flag law, something that our caucus has really been pushing for the past several weeks, is super encouraging.
Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. As lawmakers work through possible gun reform, to the pundits here, and maybe this is just from a personal thing, I keep going back to say the Tennessee shooter, which is really what started all this. The parents, after the facts, were aware of issues. A doctor was aware of issues. Red flags or no red flag laws, no one said anything. Just from full disclosure, I used to be a police officer, and if someone calls in and says, hey, I'm kind of concerned, police officers can go by and visit, and now that person knows they know about you. There's, even without a red flag law, you could take a call from a parent who's concerned. So this is the question, I think, how do we get people to notice these mental health issues that lead to shootings, and how do we get them to report it before it happens?
Well, we have to look, at the issue of gun homicides. Half the gun homicides in the country are suicides. They aren't, homicides, criminal homicides. So the red flag laws, I think, are most important in addressing, and that's 24,000 people, in addressing, families of people who are suicidal that are going to hurt themselves. I think there's more clear evidence that people will report someone who they think is suicidal, versus they don't know actually what's going on in their mind. Are they actually going to go out, commit a homicide, and then succumb to death by cop, which is a very common thing, I think, in people with mental health issues. So, it is the hardest thing to get into the person's mind. It's kind of like we don't think someone's going to do something so horrendous as walking into a school and killing children. So we almost dismiss it from our inventory of things we should discuss. So it's really difficult, and it's going to be the hardest thing to do with gun violence. That's why banning things like large capacity magazines, doing red flag laws, better background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the boyfriend loophole, are things that you can do that while you're working on the issue of mental health, addressing people who might become mass murderers. There's no consistency among the people that are doing that, but maybe it's a first step.
Well, let's give Courtney and Michael a quick chance here, probably about 45 seconds each. Courtney?
And in the case of the Nashville shooter, we've heard that her parents have said that they didn't think she should have had firearms, yet she got them somehow. So, that's where a red flag law could have been incredibly helpful, because if you don't think your child has a gun, but you don't think they should have one, well, a red flag law might be able to prevent that from happening. But I'm going to go back to something that Craig says about this, which is allowing the CDC to study gun violence like the public health crisis that it is. And until we can get more of that information, we're just going to keep talking in circles. But it would require a lot of our elected officials to accept that information and start doing something with it rather than dismissing it because it doesn't fit their narrative.
And Michael?
I'd like to see in every single school, and this may be a reach, but I'd like to see in every single school at least 3 armed security officers there to protect that building, that school. I don't think it's too much. It may be a sign of the times, but something has to be done to protect children from folks who are mentally ill that have weapons. I've taken to asking people when I go into a store like a Rural King and I see someone with a weapon, I walk up and ask them, are you good with it? If something happens, can you protect the people that are in the store? And you'd be surprised at the number of people that they don't really realize that if you have a gun and gunfire breaks out, someone's going to be expecting you to use that gun to protect the people that are in that store or building. So the way to stop some gun violence is guns in the hands of people who are willing to use them to protect folks who don't have guns. That's a starting point. Then we deal with the mental health issue, but the guns, they're not going away.
Right. Right. It's there's so many out there. And again, not taking any sides, but obviously you would think that you want to have someone stand guard until you can figure out how to stop someone from coming, because people are going to keep coming. As Craig mentioned, it just keeps happening. Anyway, with that, I'm going to wrap up Tennessee This Week for this week. I want to thank the pundits for their time and their opinions. I want to thank you for watching, and we hope you have a great day.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Next Star Broadcasting.